Welcome to the evolution of art supplies. My name is Michaela Westra. Who's ready to find out what the famous Jackson Pollock and colored pencils have in common? Now, before we had colored pencils, we had our classic graphite and lead pencils. Both of these are wrapped in wood, and I'm going to tell you why. When we had graphite to draw with, it's very soft and brittle, and we needed something to hold it. So we started with string, and we moved into hollowed out wood to hold our graphite, and that's how our wood pencils started. Now, the shift from graphite to colored pencils was originally intended for mark making and just office work, not really for artwork. Now, these colorful pencils were originally called marking pencils for that purpose, and these were created in 1835 by a J.S. Staedtler. It wasn't until 1908 that they were actually produced by Faber Castell for an art purpose. The first colored pencils were made by combining pigment with clay. Now, this was a little brittle, so over time we were adding wax to it to give it a little bit more stability. Eventually, we created a water-soluble colored pencil and even an oil-based colored pencil. Now, when I brought up Jackson Pollock and colored pencils, what do they really have in common? In 1946, Jackson Pollock started his drip painting, which is how we know him. He was able to use paint and allow it to act in its original form, and you can see paint as paint. He did the same thing with colored pencils. Now, in the late 1930s, 3 sketchbooks were discovered of his personal studies. In these, he is using mostly just colored pencil. And you're able to see how he treats the colored pencil very similar to how he was treating those drip paintings, where he's allowing the colored pencil to really shine as itself. The fun thing about these 3 sketchbooks is we're able to see the thought process about his work. He's doing 3 different things in these sketchbooks. The first thing is he's copying masters. He's studying the old masters and what everyone else is doing, which is what everyone does. They connect to the past when creating something new. The second thing is cubism. So he's looking at these classic statues and master paintings, and he's able to condense it down into very simple forms and shapes. The third thing he's doing is kind of psychedelic. He's allowing all of these things to blend and mix and melt together to create something truly new. And with those ones, these are very similar to the sketches he would draw for his therapist. Now, using what we've learned about Jackson Pollock and his style and ability to let this material shine, I'm going to use that thought process when creating my own colored pencil drawing. I'm also going to look at the way he is able to let something classic and well-known, like a Greek sculpture, and turn it into something very colorful and fluid. So I'm going to take a look at how he thinks and apply it to my own work. Okay, so now we are going to do our own colored pencil drawing. I have some Bristol paper here, which Jackson Pollock used his own sketchbook, so it's more of a sketchbook material. I find Bristol to be a lot softer and allows that vibrancy of those colored pencils to really shine. Now, I'm looking at 2 of Jackson Pollock's pieces of art from his sketchbooks that I was mentioning. One of them is more of a surreal landscape, and the other is just a wonderful, fluid combination of colors and shapes and shadows. I'm going to let these 2 pieces be my inspiration for this. And just like Jackson Pollock did, he's looking at statues and old artwork and making it into something more unique to him. So I'm going to do the same thing, taking his work and making it a little bit more unique to me. So I'm going to create a kind of surreal landscape like his untitled piece, and allow for a little bit more color like his other untitled piece. So I'm going to start with some greens because I want mine to be a lot more vibrant His is kind of dark and moody, and I want something a little bit more in line with some of my other artwork. I really enjoy bright colors. So I'm allowing him to inspire me by looking at the way he thinks, the way he works, but also letting my own personality shine through. Now he has kind of like a fiery mountainside in the background, and I kind of like that, especially with these blues and greens that I've chosen for my palette. I like that kind of contrast, allowing greens and blues to contrast with my yellowy oranges. Now, very similar to what he did, I'm going to create that kind of funky, dystopic looking landscape. So I'm going to call this sketch done. I can always use this as a reference to go even further, maybe even go from this and create a completely new landscape. But I feel pretty good about where I went from looking at Jackson Pollock to this here now. Again, I am using him as inspiration to create something that I feel very connected to. So I'm using the structure of this very surreal landscape to create something that feels a little bit more closer to what I would make. Now, today we were able to see just how far these colored pencils have come. They started out as just mark-making tools, very similar to pencils, graphite pencils. And now we have hundreds of colors to choose from. And it really shows how much we can do with it now. And thanks to Jackson Pollock, he's showed us that we really can use it in so many different ways. I'm Michaela Westra, and that was the evolution of colored pencils. Now, before colored pencils, we had just regular colored pencils, as we know them.
Hold on, that sentence was right.
You said before colored pencils, we had colored pencils.
Yeah.
Before colored pencils, we had colored
But
pencils.
it almost sounded like you were saying it in italics, like, well, before colored pencils, we had colored pencils. And I'm like, did we have a colored pencil I didn't know about?